apologize for this in advance, but brr, it's cold in here. There must be some trappers
in the atmosphere. I said, brr.
We're so cool.
Look, even my almost teenager is walking around like singing it. So I know that it's it's moving
cool.
through the ages. We are cool.
Yes, bring it on. Okay, and today we are bringing on how to dress your baby for the cold temperatures. If that my intrusive thoughts won with that
I
open,
liked it.
But
it's very good.
Thank you. I will not enjoy listening back to that of this episode, but it's getting cold. Particularly here in Melbourne. You're in Port Macquarie. It's coming up in all the places people ask us questions. How are we dressing babies for this colder weather? So if you're in the Northern Hemisphere or somewhere far more exotic than us, we will briefly talk about some considerations for the warmer weather. Otherwise, park this episode for 6 months and come back to it as you head into winter. We're always trying to dress our babies for the coldest part of the morning, which regardless of the time of year is roughly 2 to 4 a.m. But not only that, even in a temperature-controlled room, we drop a couple of degrees as humans in those early hours of the morning. And I know it all too well from doing many night duty shifts as a nurse. And come 4 a.m., we are huddled under blankets from the blanket warmer because our bodies are just doing their normal circadian rhythm dips and whatnot, and we just happen to be wide awake for it, and we are cold to our bones. So we want to dress our babies for the coldest part of the morning. So let's talk about how we would be advising our families in these colder months as we head into winter. I think before we get into exact temperatures, Red Nose, who are our safe sleep guidelines and SIDS guidelines here in Australia, they actually don't recommend a specific room temperature for babies. Instead, they emphasise dressing babies appropriately for the room's temperature, ensuring, of course, that they sleep on their backs with their head and face uncovered. And I think you and I absolutely follow along with that there is no perfect room temperature.
So I think we are super lucky to have toggle-rated sleeping bags nowadays. Something that, our parents didn't have. They were doing a lot of guesswork, are they too hot? Are they too cold? Toggle-rated bags have been a game changer because the tog rating allows us to understand that the bag is designed for a specific temperature range. And so that's why there's quite a few tog-rated temperature things, 2.5s, 3.5s, 1 tog, 0.2, all the things. Tog stands for thermal overall grade, and it's a measure of how warm the bag is. The good thing about winter is that we can sort of see what our room is sort of dipping to overnight. So, your monitor might have a temperature display that, indicates sort of it might be 19 degrees, or you might have a grow egg, or you just might know that to the touch it feels very cold. And then you can sort of select your temperature, your sleeping bag dependent on the range that it's dipping to.
So a lower number of a tog rating means that the fabric is thinner and less insulating, so it's suitable for warmer rooms. So the lower the tog, let's say a 0.2 tog or a 1 tog, is more for our really hot summer rooms. Maybe there's no air conditioning or cooling and we're working with a really hot temperature, versus a higher tog rating, let's say a 2.5 to 3.5, that indicates a thicker, more insulated fabric. So that's what we're wanting to use for the cooler rooms and the cooler temperatures.
Yeah. That's right. So it just means that the manufacturers will also provide you with a list of layers that might be appropriate for each temperature range. So the layering of the sleeping bag is the crucial element in terms of getting the most out of the bag and keeping your baby nice and warm and regulating their heat and their cooling dependent on those factors.
For me personally, in our house, I run extremely cold, and then therefore my little internal thermostat dictates the house's thermostat, because otherwise I know I have been waking at 4 a.m. and I sleep in pajamas and often in my dressing gown, and I know I can still wake cold. So maybe I'm on the far end of I'm a cliche woman that I run cold. Yeah, I'm like an Eskimo. we have temperature controlling in our house, and almost year round, I can keep the children's rooms at somewhere between 19 and 21 degrees Celsius, probably closer to the 21 degrees Celsius. My 3-year-old is still in a sleeping bag, so I still am using TOG rating guidelines and recommendations. And I find that in a 19 to 21 degrees Celsius room, in Melbourne, I can almost year round get away with this combination of a singlet, a Bonds Wondersuit, or a long sleeve, long legged sleeper, and a 2.5 to 3.5 TOG rated sleeping bag, depending on what's in the wash. And I personally have never had a baby that has been sweating in that combination. I find it a very easy set and forget for going to bed in that room temperature and also covering my bases for the 3 and 4 a.m. chilly part of the morning.
I think there's one thing that we do want to sort of touch on is there is a big difference between taking the edge off your little one's room, like with heating, and heating the room up. And one big thing I would love for families just to consider is if you're walking into your little one's room and you open the door and you kind of get smacked in the face with a lot of heat, then I'm going
sort of
to
that thick
recommend, that maybe you just dial it down a little bit. The ideal temperature range to sleep is 16 to 20 degrees, but it's 16 degrees is quite cold. I would love for you just to sort of do what Sally does. Maybe.
I feel cold just listening to it. But there's lots of people that do sleep really well in that.
I mean, and they can. Like if you're lovely and bundled up and you're super cozy and, it can be beautiful to sort of sleep in a cooler, environment. But I think you really want to make sure that you're using the TOG-rated sleeping bag to its maximum potential rather than wanting to heat the room too hot, because you're kind of missing the mark in that, like use the TOG-rated bag for its thermal resistance. So use your layering underneath. So if it is dipping below, say, 18, 19 degrees, you're probably going to be using the manufacturer's guidelines and, layering up. So you're using those extra layers. If it is dipping below, say, 16, 17 degrees, then your best bet is to start moving towards more of a 100% merino sleeping bag at that point. Just with the natural fibers, it has that magic quality to sort of do a little bit of a lower temperature range. But yeah, in terms of, using the sleeping bag to its full potential, use the layering. Little ones will tend to sort of show you signs that they may need more layers underneath. If you are still having a funny stubborn waking around that, say, 4 o'clock mark, and you sort of can rule out sort of hunger and all the usual things, just by adding an extra layer underneath. So if you're a little bit unsure about using all the layers, start slow.
Yeah, and I think it's more than appropriate, particularly in today's economic climate, that we're not all able to have heating and cooling on 24/7. But not only that, I do absolutely appreciate that a lot of families also don't feel comfortable with having a heater on in their babies' rooms. So that's when a little thermometer in the room is going to be your best friend, so that when you go in to do a settle or a resettle or a feed in those early hours of the morning, you're able to just get a quick glimpse as to what the temperature is, so that the next night you know whether or not perhaps you need to add in an extra layer. And so in those cooler rooms, or as you said, we start working in a merino wool sleeping bag. You and I, and this is zero affiliation, love the Wool Babe brand. If families are looking for a merino wool sleeping bag recommendation. And a lot of my families that I work with in the Northern Hemisphere also love Woolino. And it just means that there is that increased in adaptability and breathability, particularly in those chillier temperatures in the morning.
It's really important when we're talking about layering that we do not subscribe to the idea that you layer TOG-rated bags to get additional
we're not
warmth.
mixing TOG ratings. That's a really good point.
I have heard on the chat groups and so forth that there are 1 TOG bags being used underneath a 2.5. in the hopes that it will the calculation will get to a 3.5 tog bag. But you're mixing togs, and then we cannot be confident that you may not be overheating your little one. So try and stay away from doing those types of things. However, there are brands out there that have got specific garments made that may be like 1 tog pajamas to go underneath a 2.5 tog sleeping bag, but you want to make sure that you're using that particular brand with that particular, you in conjunction with that sleeping bag. So following those manufacturers' guidelines and trying not to mix and match for sure.
The thing I will say is that when we are looking to fix a sleep issue from a holistic perspective, and as we know, you and I are always trying to minimize tears, making sure that baby is warm enough is one of those fixes that you can go and check the room temperature tonight, do a quick audit of what baby is wearing, maybe bump up the tog rating if you feel like that's the right step, and it can make the biggest difference. And when we recorded our early rising episode, we've actually had people that have said, hey, I listened to that and I went and made this one simple change, and we went from a 5:30 a.m. wake to a 7 a.m. wake. And when we're talking about fixing sleep and looking at it holistically, this can be a change that you can make with no tears involved.
And that's where the confidence comes in with the tog rated bags. So they are thermally tested. So use that to help build your confidence around what your little one is wearing, and use it as a really great guide for should I add more or less. So it's a really good starting point.
If you're listening to this and you're like, forget the heater, I've got the air conditioning turned on, this is actually applicable to you too, because when the air conditioning is on, and this is going to sound like I'm mansplaining something here, it's actually blowing cold air into the room in order to cool it down. And so the air that is going on the baby is chilly because it is trying to cool the room down. And I personally experienced this. We had 6 weeks in Bali over Australia's summer, and I packed for my son, because he's still in a sleeping bag, a 1 tog and his 2.5 and 3.5, his usual ones from home, thinking, okay, it's going to be really hot in Indonesia, I'll pack the 1 tog. I would say that because the air conditioning was on constantly, it was actually probably chillier in the rooms than it was here in Melbourne, despite it being summer. And so the 1 tog did not get a look in at all. We were still using the 2.5 to 3.5 because the air conditioning actually makes the room cold. Does that make sense?
Yes, it totally does.
Okay, hot take, air conditioning makes the room cold.
Mind-blowing. Boom.
Groundbreaking nap trap advice here.
But I think sometimes you just sort of do get stuck in that whole, okay, well, it's bloody hot out here. It's 28 degrees. And then you know, it's hot in the room, and, maybe you haven't cooled it down before you're starting a nap and all the things. So it just feels like, oh, well, it makes perfect sense to have a 0.2 tog rated sleeping bag on. I'm going to cool the room down to 21. And then all of a sudden we've got an icicle in the cot. So, it does. Sometimes we just need a little gentle reminder, don't we, about those things. Yeah.
Here's a question for you. If you're choosing a sleeping bag, if you're going to the shops today and you're looking at let's say 3.5, would you be getting one with the arms, the long sleeve arms, or do you go arms out? Now, I have never owned one that has long sleeves, and I have never had a baby waking from being cold. But in saying that, I also have always had some degree of heating and cooling in my children's rooms. So what would be your advice?
Personally, I feel like you can get a better wear out of a sleeveless bag. And also from where I live, we're on the mid-north coast of New South Wales. So it doesn't, while I'm absolutely freezing because it's 16 degrees here, it's not actually that cold. So I feel like, the big scheme of things, I come from New Zealand,
the home of merino wool.
Yeah, my family are always like, why do you think that this is cold? Anything under 20 degrees for me and I'm wearing a thermal. Personally, I feel like you can probably get more wear out of a sleeveless 2.5 or 3.5 tog bag using layering underneath as well. Maybe that's because it's only really super cold, let's just say for 4 to 6 weeks, like in the heart of winter. And, if you are using temperature controlled rooms, then there may not be it may not be necessary to have the sleeves. I appreciate that. For some families, they like the idea. It just builds their confidence of having a sleeved bag.
It looks really cute
but
too.
not overly necessary. A lot of families will be really concerned that their little ones' hands and their noses and faces are they feel like super, super cold to the touch, and that the room may still be too cold. But the extremities, it's fine if the extremities are icy. So hands, nose, and so forth. As long as they are nicely bundled up and warm around the chest
core.
and back, that they're nice and warm, and they will be totally fine. So, so try not to worry about the hands. I know when they come to touch, or when you're breastfeeding and then they touch you, it's like a shock to the system.
Yeah, yeah.
I
actually want to go and
check
the tog rating of my Doona on my bed, because we have.
Oh, yes, this is interesting.
Yeah. And sometimes I work with families who say baby sleeps really well up until 3 or 4 a.m. I cannot resettle. I cannot get them to go back to sleep in their cot or their bassinet. But if I bring them into bed with me, they go back to sleep. Now, yes, sure, maybe there's a sleep association happening, but a lot of the time it's actually not that. It's that when they come into bed with you, they get your body heat. And you may have the Doona somewhere, the bed has been heated, you are warm, and it's just that little bit extra that is warming that baby up in those early hours of the morning. So if you find yourself in that scenario as well, just have a look at, maybe do I need to bump this up to sort of mirror what baby is feeling when they come into bed with you.
Yeah, that's a really good point. That's a really common thing that happens for sure.
Yeah. I need one of those Doonas that is like a his and hers, where my side is, I don't know, how high do tog ratings go? Because whatever the max is, I'll take 2. And then Mr. Sleep Concierge can have, I don't know, a thin sheet year round.
I did think before, a question has often popped up, through consultations over the years, where parents don't feel that confident around a tog sleeping bag for a baby because they're only 3.5, but an adult's tog rating is maybe 15. And the reason for that is our duvets or Doonas, they only sit on top of us. So the baby sleeping bag we are wrapping them. That is all around.
They are wearing it.
The thermal heat is trapped within their body. So that's why there's a big difference between our tog rated Doonas and duvets versus
that's a
their
good point.
sleeping bags.
I also think, as an adult, I'm sure it's like we kick the Doona off, we put our foot out.
Oh, yes, I'm always getting a leg out.
If we get cold. So we have that autonomy, even in our sleep, to sort of manage our own temperature needs, whereas these little poppets don't. So we just want to be able to make sure they're nice and snug to last all night.
That's also the other reason why I prefer the sleeveless bags, if I'm honest, because if they a little bit of heat release, if they're getting a little bit hot.
Yeah.
So that's my preference.
All right. Well, hopefully that has helped you navigate as we head into the colder months, how to dress your baby. And if you do have that stubborn 3 or 4 a.m. waking, just have a look at what the temperature is, check the manufacturing guidelines, and then maybe even see if you need to just either bump up the tog rating or add on a little layer on underneath. But we definitely don't need to be heating rooms to then be in a really low tog rating sleeping bag. We just want to take the edge off and make it really nice and comfortable for sleep, and then dressing appropriately underneath and choosing the correct tog rating. And then if you're in the colder parts of the world, or you don't feel comfortable having a heater on, then we can start looking at a merino wool sleeping bag that often don't have a tog rating. They just have a temperature guideline. So, for example, 18 to 25 degrees Celsius or something like that. And then you can choose the one that matches your baby's room in those early hours of the morning.
The merino bags, just one little other thing is, even though they are a little bit of an investment piece, they will last. They've got great durability and they are so well made. And they are going to reduce your energy bill at the end of the quarter.
Do they come in adult size? Because maybe that's my answer.
Yes, sign us up.
All right. Well, go and dress your babies nice and snug, make a hot cup of coffee, and, well, if you're like me, I'm going to go and turn the heater on, and we will see you on the next episode of Nap Trap.
See you later. Bye.
Bye.